Fatima, I'm going to just start. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. A warm welcome to yet another session of Flow Eminent Women series. A very good evening to our esteemed guest speaker, Ms. Zainab Salbi, accomplished business editor and anchor, Ms. Fatima Karan, Fiki Flow President, Janvi Fukan, the Presidium, governing body, past President's Council, and Flow members. The Eminent Women series. If I could request everyone to please turn their mics off to mute, it would be great. Thank you so much. The Eminent Women series was initiated by President Fukan to showcase illustrious women achievers to share their life journey so as to create an inspirational learning platform for Pan-India members and thereby to make a difference to each of their lives. Tonight is no exception. So we have amidst us a phenomenal global icon who, through her life and work, has had a profound impact globally on social norm change for women's empowerment causes. Ms. Zainab Salbi is a woman of courage, ingenuity, vision, and achievement. She serves as an incredible and inspiring role model for women across countries, regions, and generations. She has broken glass ceilings, pushed the frontiers of women leadership, and has paved the path as a trailblazer for other women to follow. Under her leadership as the founder and CEO of Women for Women International during the years 1993 to 2011, the Organization for Women Survivors of War grew from helping 30 women upon its inception to more than 460,000 women in 8 conflict areas, leading to a distribution of more than 140 million USD in aid and loans, and has impacted more than 1.7 million family members. In the year 2015, Zainab launched Add-In Productions, a company which specializes in content for women and by women. Under her leadership, she created and hosted award-winning The Nida Show, a talk show dedicated to addressing and inspiring women in the Arab world. The Zainab Salbi Project, an original global series in collaboration with Huffington Post, US and AOL. #MeToo, Now What, an original series with PBS, and her latest, Through Her Eyes with Yahoo News. Zainab is the author of several bestseller books. Her latest is Freedom is an Inside Job. She's consistently identified as one of the most influential women in the world, right from Newsweek, Fortune magazine, The Guardian, Fast Company, and Arabian Business. She's a graduate of economics from George Mason University, and she has a master's degree in developmental studies from the London School of Economics. She also has a few honorary doctoral degrees to her credit as well. She's the recipient of many awards and accolades, the recent one being the Eleanor Roosevelt Walkill Award for being the champion for women survivors and inspirational global journalist for the year 2019. Ms. Salbi is probably one of the foremost women around the globe, known actually as the here and now of feminine power. It is both a privilege and honor to have you here with us, Ms. Salbi.
It is my honor to be with you. Thank you so much for this kind and generous introduction.
Now she's talking. Wait a minute. इसमें उन्होंने हमें वैसे ही कर
In order to moderate and to steer the conversation with Ms. Salbi, we have amidst us Ms. Fatima Karan, who was the consulting editor and senior anchor at Business Television India. She has been a leading anchor and producer since 2005. She was a founding employee of one of the country's top news organizations, where she anchored and produced primetime shows. At BTVI, away from hosting daily flagship shows, she's interviewed India's top business and political leaders. She also pioneered Women Mean Business and was the channel face for the Financial Planner series. Away from the studio broadcast, she regularly moderates and drives on-the-ground business and finance conversations. Fatima holds dual degrees in economics and international relations, together with a master's in law, diplomacy, and business. Her previous career was in banking. She has lived and worked across continents and is now based in New Delhi. It is indeed a special pleasure to have you here with us, Ms. Karam.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for being here with us.
Thank you very, very much for that. And you know, it's so funny every time somebody starts reading out what one has done, you realize how quickly time is going by and how long ago some of these things were, including those degrees. But thank you very much, ladies. I just want to, first of all, tell you that I'm very, very excited to be able to speak to Zainab, of course. And that's also, number one, because I'm incredibly impressed and touched by her achievements. But it's not very often that someone who is into hosting gets to speak to a larger expert in hosting. So she's probably going to be sort of, carrying me on her shoulders in this conversation. Today, we're going to be sort of discussing, of course, Zainab's achievements as well as how she's seeing the world around me. But before that, I really want to tell Janvi to come in, because she, of course, as the president and also a chief stakeholder in this whole gathering, is someone that I'd really like for her to sort of start by asking the first question. So over to you there.
Sure, Fatima. But before that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Janvi Phukan, National President of FLOW. She's the 37th president and is the first president from the Northeast of India. She is passionate about women's empowerment and strongly advocates and works tirelessly towards building sustainable livelihoods for women's economic upliftment. Ms. Phukan is an entrepreneur and co-founder of 2 national tourism award-winning companies in travel and tourism, long-distance river cruising, hospitality, tea, and textiles, all of which touch women's lives and livelihoods. I would now like to invite President Janvi to deliver her welcome address, please.
Thank you very much, Kritika. A very good evening to all. A woman with a voice is by definition a strong woman, but the search to find that voice can be remarkably different. That's in the words of Melinda Gates, and you, Zainab Salbi, so embody that, her thought. You are not only the strong woman with the voice, but you are that woman who has helped women across the globe find their voices. So who could be more apt for our Eminent Women series than you, Zainab Salbi, humanitarian, author, and media personality, a strong and empowered woman who unpacks a message of hope and freedom with a gentle boldness that can only come from one who has walked the journey. Ms. Salbi, on behalf of FLOW and the 17th chapter that I represent, as the 37th National President, I am delighted to welcome you. FLOW is the women's wing of FICCI, the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we are perhaps the oldest business chamber for women in South Asia. FLOW is a collective voice of 8,000 women entrepreneurs, businesswomen, professionals across India, and also the voice of those women beyond our membership whose lives we have impacted directly or indirectly over the decades. Ms. Salbi, you are a powerful voice in calling for education, employment, and empowerment of women, and are an inspiration not only in Iraq, but across the globe. You have dedicated your life to helping women in war-torn regions rebuild their lives and their communities. In your memoir, Hidden in Plain Sight, Growing in the Shadow of Saddam, you have written about being raised in Saddam Hussein's inner circle. Your father was Saddam Hussein's personal pilot. You left Iraq for an arranged marriage in the US, which quickly became another form of tyranny. But in 1993, when you heard about the rape and concentration camps in Bosnia, you realized that you could no longer remain passive. So at the age of 23, you founded Women for Women International, a grassroots humanitarian and development organization dedicated to serving women survivors of wars and rebuilding their lives. As Time magazine rightly calls you, most of all, Salbi's organization gives women a voice. We are so proud to have you with us today. You are a relentless change maker who has changed so many lives, and I know you will continue to do so. Oprah Winfrey named you one of the 25 women changing the world in People magazine. President Clinton named you one of the 21st century heroes, and Foreign Policy magazine has called you one of the 100 global thinkers. As a token of our appreciation and gratitude for giving us time and coming to speak with our women in India, we have a congratulatory video we've put together for you and a virtual memento. I do hope you like it, and may I request Vicky IT to please share it on the screen.
This is the Zainab Salbi Project.
I'm deeply touched. Thank you very much. Very, very touched. Thank you. Thank you.
Fatima.
Thank you for having shown us that. As I was saying earlier, before sort of giving Janvi the sort of stage, I also, once again, I'm going to come to her because I think it's a very special opportunity for me to have the leadership of Flow here, as well as the audience, and of course, to have Zainab here in terms of the kind of overall perspective she brings. So I am actually going to go back to Janvi just to sort of ask her what she really wants to ask our dear guest before we really get started with the rest of the conversation this evening.
Thank you. We have to, Fatima, I want to also thank you for agreeing to moderate our session. You're no stranger to Flow. You have helped us in some session earlier in the past. So I would like to also offer you the virtual memento on behalf of Flow. So may I quickly first ask the IT team to present our memento to you. This is for Zainab. I mean, this is for Fatima, sorry.
All right, we're doing all of this virtually. So.
Yes, we're doing this in reverse. Right.
All good.
Now, to start off, Ms. Salbi, Zainab, we've always known that, how was it like to, very briefly, you have done so much to share with you today, but very briefly, tell us how was it like, early years growing up in the Saddam's area, Iraq?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here and for the generous, extremely generous and kind introduction. You know, it's interesting seeing the video and hearing your description of my life, and then relating it to one of the comments that was said earlier about, you know, the voices of women and how do we discover our voice. And I think I grew up by growing up in Iraq, and there were three things that impacted my life. One is, of course, I knew Saddam and called him uncle. And there was no voice in here because there was so much fear. I remember my mom used to say, I am living in prison, but I can't prove to anybody that I am in prison. And the prison cage is golden, but they are prison cages anyway. So there was no voice whatsoever. The way we survived that relationship, you know, which is, you know, being close to him did not mean that we are safe from danger. It only meant we are closer to danger. The way that survived is to have no voice. The rules were to smile when he smiled, and to laugh when and to cry when he cried, and to nod and agree with whatever he said. But you have thoughts, and you know what's wrong and what's right. And as a kid, I went to a normal school, and as in not the palace school, and I knew that there were people being executed in the street. I knew that there were people who were imprisoned for saying the wrong thing. I knew that, and I stayed silent because I was afraid for my family's well-being and safety. And that silence is like, you're not oblivious to the silence, or you're not oblivious to the injustice when you are having nice dinners at the palace. You're aware of it, but you stay silent. And then I think a lot about that silence, you know, because, and I'll get back to it, because I acted on it when I was able to escape it and go to a country what allowed me to speak. But still, I think a lot about that silence and what does that mean? The other thing that impacted my life in Iraq was war. I grew up in war, in the Iran-Iraq war, and I realized at a very young age that as the world is talking about war from a men's perspective, politics and guns and tanks and armies, that as a kid living in it, it was really the women who were running the show in everyday life in war. The teachers were women, the doctors were women, you know, the police women were every woman. And it's like, no one is talking about how women are running the show and keeping life going. And everyone is just talking about the frontline discussion. And I long came to realize the backline discussion is actually very, very important and very powerful. And that is run by women. And we need to acknowledge it, we need to understand it, and we need to incorporate women's voices as the leaders of the back line, basically, in what does it mean to have peace. And the third one, and I want to connect it again to voice, is my mother. And so we are living in war and living to a very, very close to a dictator, as in I was not allowed to have normal friends. Very close to dictator. Our house was bugged, our, you know, telephones were bugged, everything about our life was bugged and supervised. But my mother would tell me, you have to be strong. You have to be independent. Don't let anybody touch you or talk to you in the wrong way. And, you know, so even though I didn't have a voice per se in front of Saddam, I had my mother instilled, like almost tattooed these values in my DNA. You have to be strong. You have to be independent. Don't let anybody talk to you or touch you in the wrong way. And that helped pave the path for me to in my life forward, as I encountered quite challenges, a lot of challenges actually in my life. But what kept me going is my mother's mantra. And it always ended with smile to life, for life shall smile at you. And so even despite the challenges and despite the fear and the horror and growing up seeing my mother trying to commit suicide and being in arranged marriage and rape myself in the arranged marriage and escaping with no money and no, family in America and all of that, you sort of I lived with these 3 mantras, 4 mantras: strong, independent, don't let anybody abuse you, and smile at life, for it shall smile at you. I would say that's the gist of it, my growing up.
That's quite a gist. Is it okay if I jump in here, ladies? And
yes, over to you now, Fatima.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that was a great first question, in fact, that Janvi sort of has asked, because at the end of the day, one is really trying to understand how a person goes through all of that and then achieves everything you did and starts it actually within 3 years of being, in the States, and then raises some, it's quite a large sum of money that you've done since then. I won't get into the pedantics of, fundraising as well as giving at this stage in the conversation, but I want to ask you something, because the experiences that you've had could lead a person very defensive and closed, as well as scarred, okay? But on the other hand, you've spoken extensively about, letting go of anger in terms of leadership, and also really trying to understand the other. How do you actually do that? And you cannot tell me that meditation and pottery are are your secrets, because, I've tried meditating, I've tried to do pottery. I haven't raised that kind of money for anyone. I don't have that patience in me yet. So tell me what do you mean by these concepts?
Well, first of all, I love that you asked this question, Fatima. And people usually see me only in my accomplishment, but no one has dug into my values and what I stand for. So I appreciate it when I feel seen, and this question is reflect that you're seeing me, and I really appreciate it. I led with anger for the longest time. As a matter of fact, I really did. When I started Women for Women and started on an organization, by the way, at that time, no one knew anything about wars, women and wars. Women issues were not popular at the time. I brought a subject up that was not talked about before. And, it goes from, and I was an immigrant. I am an immigrant woman who was a Muslim from Iraq in America, where Iraq was the enemy, basically, right? So all the odds were stacked against me, to be honest, but I believed and I led with passion and anger at the injustice. And 10 years later, when the organization was already helping a few thousand women and raising a few $1 million, and someone asked me, what keeps you going? And I'm like, I am pissed off at injustice. And I was like, that is the reason that it keeps me going. Now, it was very personal, as in, I didn't know it was very personal, really. I just thought these women are abused and being raped in wars like Bosnia and Congo and Afghanistan and, and Rwanda. And I have to do something now that I am in America and I have the ability to speak freely in America without fear. So I have to do something. I have to take advantage of that opportunity I have as a human being. And it's in the course of service that led me to evolve, really. And the evolution happened over time, So it happened one time meeting, because I was like advocating for women's rights, but not saying anything about my story, right? It was all about these poor women in these other countries that I don't know about, and they're poor and uneducated and living in a hut. They have the story. I am an educated woman who has a master's degree and lived in a nice home and I don't have a story. And it was few things. One, it was a Congolese woman who basically was telling me about how her horrible story. She was raped, everything in her home was burnt and pillaged. And she said, but I never told anybody my story. And I was like, well, should I keep your story a secret? And she said, if I can tell the whole world about my story, I would. So other women would not have to go through what I have gone through. You go ahead and tell the story. So the point of what I'm trying to say is, one, is I led with anger. And in the middle of the road, I realized I'm projecting all my anger at others, but not taking responsibility that I do have a story and I need to break my story, right? So that was the first phase is, okay, how can I tell women to speak up if I am not speaking up about my intimate story? And it was one of the most courageous acts I've done. And you probably will all understand, writing my personal life and breaking all the secret codes the family told me never to tell anybody about it, not to tell the neighbor about it. I told it to the world. And it was very scary. It was scary. I was worried about my safety, my family's safety. But the choice was, do I live in fear and, and constantly watching behind my back, or do I take a jump, a leap of faith and tell the truth, but at least I free myself from that fear? And I did it. And what I realized in the process, that I actually, all the things that I feared, people will kill me, people will do this, people were not, that the fear was in me. And yes, I got criticism and attacks, but I got more compliments and more people walking to me from my own country of origin, Iraq, saying, thank you for writing this book. You told our story. So that's first, number one is that I learned how to tell my story first and not project everything on the other. But honestly, Fatima, the one that changed, that moved from the anger to start reflecting on myself, was my anger at men. Because, I was raped myself. I worked with women who have been raped. I've seen a lot of injustice in the world caused by men, and I was very, very angry at them. And I was in Afghanistan in a refugee camp one day, really early on after the war, the first, when America and the Allies went to Afghanistan, and two guys who looked like the Taliban walked towards me. And I was scared. I was really scared. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna kill me. I'm not covering. I look a foreigner. They're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill me. And I was like, let's run to the car and just escape. And my colleague said, we can't run. If we do, jeopardize the safety of other women. So I'm waiting for these guys to come, but my heart is pounding and I was really scared. And they arrived and they put their hands in front of me and they say, we want to thank you, to shake my hand. And they said, we want to thank you for making our wives happy. We haven't been able to see them smile in a very long time. And to be honest, I was ashamed of myself because I said, here I am fighting for women's rights, fighting for women's voices, but I was cornering men as one thing. I was doing to men what I was fighting against them to do. Basically, they cornered women as only victims and as only passive and as only thing. I was fighting against that. And here I am cornering men as only aggressors and as only abusers and as only rapists. And that's when I realized, oh my God. So I shook their hands, but I was ashamed in myself about my own prejudice. And it took me to a journey, and I decided that I am going to have to investigate my own prejudice. And I started talking with a lot of men in wars. And I realized when I talked to them and saw them, that indeed they were the rapists and the bad guys, but they were also the guys who could never rape and could never kill. And they were the kind guys, and they were the feared guy, and they were the scared guys, and they were like, they come in all colors just like we are, in all our emotions. And that took me. And so it's not meditation, Fatima. It is not meditation. It is a journey. And I would say if there is one secret to it, it's a journey that that always made me curious about reflecting and reassessing my values. Am I living them truly? Am I really, really doing what I'm asking others to do? It's sort of constantly assessing what I'm going through internally to what I'm advocating for externally. And every time I assess, I learn something new that gets me into a new path. So the meditation, you're absolutely right. The pottery, I play the piano now, all the art, these are, keeps your spirit happy, maybe, creativity is good, but they're not what makes you move from anger to another stage. What's made me move that is my own willingness to reflect inwardly and very honestly, and without giving myself a break, but without being hard on myself either, to understand, oh, I need to do this. And each time I assess that, I realized it's really hard to live by these values 100%. And it made me more compassionate, not only towards myself, but towards others as I'm asking them to do the same.
Okay. I still must tell you that I'm going to have to get my head around, some of the sort of parts of your journey that you've talked about, because I can understand, self-realization. I can understand the sort of mindfulness, as well as, of course, having a larger vision for what you want to do. And this whole thing about, asking yourself about true values every day is something I think everyone can aspire to. That brings me to what I really want to understand from someone like you, who has sort of been at the forefront of your own evolution, in a sense, as a person, as well as how you have sort of tried to help other people. I mean, whether it's been, in Rwanda, or whether you've been, in Congo, you've sort of traveled quite extensively. You've seen some, I'm sure, very disturbing things. I think some of the tales of courage you have from some of the most marginalized women can really teach a lot of the privileged a lot about how they should perhaps be thinking. But I want to understand from you, we're at this very unique juncture, I think, with, this whole COVID and how it's sort of affected, employment and public health and everything else. One of the big areas that it's also impacted is humanitarian aid also, as well as, I guess, sort of the politics of it, right? So things have kind of changed, and there's a lot of sort of politics that's sort of come into things. Funds have been dried in for certain things. The marginalized, for example, women, I believe they've, there's been financial loss, there's been, health loss. How would a person like you, who's looking at all of this and has also sort of lived through a war, has gone ahead and seen, most grim scenarios in the world, what is the snapshot that you would describe to me? If I was an alien that landed and I was asking you to sort of describe what you're seeing in the world around you, what would you say to me right now?
I will tell the aliens, it's bad, come help us.
I'm saying alien, I'm not going to let you do easy. You need to describe to me what's going on in your words right now.
I mean, obviously I'm influenced by my circumstances, which is I live in America and I watch the Middle East very carefully because that's where I'm originally from. So, so I'm going to give you my comments with the caveats of that, right? I think all of this, what is emerging, what it's that change, whether it is COVID and the economic upheaval that it led to, or uncertainties and unemployment and all of these things, is led to anger. Anger and brought up all of these issues. I mean, I see everything that is happening at the moment, including the racial injustice, being based on economic injustice, being based on there were a huge proportion, we have to do something about our economy, basically, because the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots is bigger than ever, but we actually have the same amount, we are making the same resources, we're making the same money. But I mean, in other words, it's not about the flow of money, it is about the distribution of money. And that anger is going to show itself over and over and over again in many manifestations. It's going to be on women's issues, it's going to be on racial issues, it's going to be on ethnic issues, it's going to be on youth issues, it's going to keep on manifesting. And I think if I am to summarize what the changes needs to happen, and I would say there are two prongs of changes. One is, and let's talk about one is, we do need to reassess our structures of the moment. We have to. We cannot continue with this phase because it's going to create more upheavals around the world. We really do. And that the old systems and the old leaderships and the old ways of leadership, when I say old leadership, I don't mean this person or this person, it's the old way we went about building our world. I call it masculine values. I'm not being critical, by the way, of them. The masculine values have drive, has oomph, has been able to help us manifest things and do things. But that right now, these values have arrived to a plateau because they were disconnected from feminine values. This is my terminology, feminine values. Now, we don't know much about feminine values. Even as women, we don't know much about feminine values. We think of feminine as wearing nice and soft clothes, or as speaking kindly, or as nurturing. But these are not necessary. These are feminine values maybe at the surface, and they have been defined, I would dare to say, mostly by men. But these are feminine values, you know. But feminine values, we need to discover what they are. And I can't claim I know them, but I can tell you what I'm coming to discover is a different kind of relationship, and different kind of economy, and different kind of communication with each other, with our community, with Earth, right? So just different kind of things in a flow. Now, so we need, on the one hand, to truly examine our structures, because if we're going to keep on defending these old structures of our economic structures, employment definitions, what is defined employment, racial, then we're going to lose. It's going to break. It's going to keep on breaking. That's one hand. We need to do that. And those who are in leadership have to do that. On the other hand, and this is,
I'm sorry, I'm going to take the liberty of interrupting, because first of all, I'm an Indian host at the end of the day. So
yes, of course.
It feel very strange if I just let you talk without butting in. But no, because I actually want to ask you a couple of things. You're talking about feminine, values and leadership and everything else. All of this at a time when I feel that we are particularly, and I'm going to talk, okay, let me take the liberty of talking about the United States of America, because I can obviously comment much more about that country than I can of this. We're looking at a very highly masculine, aggressive sort of scenario here, whether it's, what's going to be happening with the elections in terms of, what the leadership sort of polarization is coming down to. So where is all of this going to fit in? I mean, I want to understand, as a media, as a person who's also witnessing digital media disruptions, as well as somebody who is, at the forefront of really what's happening when it comes to politics and how that affects people. How are you sort of going to be, how are you looking at this scenario? Because I feel that we are definitely moving towards a more polarized world. Definitely, I seem to see more toxic masculinity, whether it's in leadership. How are we going to sort of handle all of this?
But Fatima, I agree with you. So that's why I'm saying, if you're an alien, I would say this is a very scary time. Here's the thing. Right. The polarization is happening, in my opinion, and this is so politically incorrect, what I'm about to say, especially in America, not only from the right. They have their own issue. And just disclaimer, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, I'm a feminist. Right. The polarization is also happening from the left, and from the very activists who are talking about injustice and talking about the inequality. And that's what I mean. Let me just explain what I mean, that they too are creating the polarization, and it takes me back to your first question about how do you move from anger to a different manifestation. So anger is important in this case. Right now, you see a lot of anger in America, right? And you see people butting heads with each other. So that's important to trigger the courage to speak about injustice. Racial injustice at the moment is the most important thing, but I guarantee you it's going to be something different tomorrow, because it's like constantly it's coming from one to the other. Now, what we have to do, the polarization of the left, which is now creating cancel culture. So if you say something that is not appropriate, whatever, it's not appropriate, it's out of context, you're canceled from society, you're erased, you can never get a job, you can never get anything. So that intolerance and that anger, I don't have issues with anger. I think anger is constructive. But when we lead with anger, we risk becoming the very thing we're fighting against. And that's why I bring the story about that man in Afghanistan. When I was leading with anger, I was becoming the prejudice that I was fighting against. And I see this today, right now. So what's my ask? What's my ask of women particularly, but honestly of people who believe in good values and values of equality and justice for all, and values that we have to be, kinder to earth, kinder to each other. What do I ask of? Is everything we're doing right now, everything we're saying feels to me is in reaction against each other in reaction to our past, to our traumas, to our anger, to our all of these things. What we really need to do is take the moment to proactively describe what do we want. You cannot, like, let me talk about America because you are, you know, it's an easier country to talk about maybe. You know, for example, there's a lot of talk about police brutality. So a lot of the activists saying defund the police. Well, that is reaction to what is something bad. But what is a proactive image? What is a proactive image of or vision for what can we do in a new way that deals with the injustice that has been experienced in the past, but not in a reactive way? And you know, when you think about it, then you come up with new ideas. As a matter of fact, one of the ideas that came up to me came from India. There was an Indian all-women female force in Liberia, part of the UN. And they studied the impact of the all-female, and you may know more about it than I do actually, but they studied the impact when you have an all-women police force as a peacekeepers. And they've proven to be more collaborative with the community. They've proven to reduce domestic violence. They've proven to use less force, but more collaboration. So there are ways to go about it in a visionary way. And that's what I call it about feminine values. So far, even women, we are reacting. We have to take the moment to lead, and lead not in reaction, lead in proaction to what is possible for the future. And that's what we're not doing right now. And that's what makes a lot of us, frankly, worried, scared, and even lonely in that voice, you know, when you don't have that anger. You know, it's like, I understand the anger, I respect it, I think it's important, but it is not enough to create change.
Sure, and I understand what you're saying about anger being a trigger, and then of course, you know, making it a far more constructive journey from that. I think that's one of the bigger points you've been trying to relay on. But I think it's also a matter of opportunity. You know, it's a matter of opportunity and creating that opportunity. I mean, I can tell you, of course, and I'm sure you know this from a business perspective, you know, corporations who've got more female leadership have a different style of leadership, and especially have been able to handle a crisis in a very different way, I would say, as well, as because of the communications as well. Now, speaking of communication, once again, I take you as sort of, you know, the whole person that you are here. And I'm only, of course, I'm sure getting to see still a very limited aspect of it. As someone who's used media, who's used communication, who talks about telling women's stories, do you think that we have a unique opportunity right now in terms of really connecting more people? And also, what role do you think media really plays when it comes to developing an aware population, developing the empathy that we're talking about, telling the real story? Because I think that the digital disruption is giving us a unique opportunity, especially away from television news networks. At least that's what's happening in our country. I would say that. I don't know what's happening elsewhere. How do you think?
Obviously, yeah, I mean, obviously it's happening everywhere, but you know, I can tell you a very personal story. So last year I was really sick. I got really sick, and I was suddenly hospitalized and operated in, and I was on the ICU for a week. And the first thing I opened my eyes. The first word I said is kindness. And you know, in the hospital, you're watching TV all the time, and I'm watching the news. And I'm watching a show I was on, you know, I'm watching the news, which I was part of creating all the time in my own shows and other shows, all of them. And I looked at it like, I don't want to be part of this, because from being in the hospital room and very vulnerable and my shields were off, it felt divisive. And I don't think the media, to be very honest, is playing a constructive role right now. It's hard to say much in the US right now because we have an election coming up in a few months, and that election is a very, very, very important election. So a voice to what I'm saying, which is we need to be fair, we need to be constructive in our criticism, we need to be calm, we need to show a holistic, so we can get the trust again, rather than we are just attack. And both sides, all what they're doing is just attack. And it's sort of whose arrows are bigger and whose arrows are sharper, basically, right now. So the media, in my opinion, is not playing a constructive role. They are niche media that is playing constructive role. niche, but they are not making it in a mainstream. These are the media that are talking about solutions. These are the media that are talking about, possibilities for the future, about new voices emerging and as an alternative way. And as someone who is in the media, every time I did a piece on that, which is actually my proudest pieces of understanding, seeing the other side. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to understand how they see and feel what's going on from their perspective. These pieces, these arguments, these shows don't go anywhere because we are not interested. We are not interested to see the other side. That requires us to step back and have an empathetic ability to listen and understand that we don't need to agree with them. But if we see it from their perspective, we may pave the path for a way forward. One of my proudest pieces, and this is about a different subject, so it's easier to talk about it right now, but at the time it was very controversial, is interviewing one of the biggest terrorists in Paris who killed 150 people, interviewing his family. He was killed at the time. And how to take the time to really understand, a lot of the coverage of this particular man, well, he is sick, mentally ill, Well, how do you take the time to really understand the story compassionately, so not agreeing at all, not agreeing, but really understand how he and his family have experienced this experience. And when I did take the time to do that, when I came out, I have to tell you, crying, not agreeing with his action. It was a terrorist action, but crying at the realization, oh my God, we have all created this. We have all created the circumstances that led him to do that. And in order to change, it's not about this one man changing. It is about the society. We also need to reflect on ourselves. That generous listening, as my friend in the media who says it, ability to look at the other side and understand it, so we can see how we can create a new way forward that is inclusive of both of us, is not existing in America, not on a mainstream. It's on a niche.
I wouldn't say it's not just existing in America. I think we're talking about a very deep sort of way of thinking, a philosophical sort of shift here. And that brings me to this whole question of vulnerability, because that's something you've also talked about. Vulnerability for us, whether we're talking about a negotiation or whether it's talking about, the projection that you're taking in from someone else, that to me is a scary word, right? Because as you said it yourself, it's all about putting up the walls. It's about sort of, coming from a position of strength. And I'm going to get into leadership again after this. But what do you mean by this whole thing about vulnerability from a place of strength? And especially when you're talking about, developing compassion, for example, for like a person who supposedly killed 100 people. I mean, I'm trying to really, as I told you, maybe I'm just not as good a human being as you are. I'll admit that too, right?
No, I love your questions. And, it reminds me, 10 years ago, I was in Davos and I was saying, we need to lead with vulnerability. And there's another woman in the panel. She's like, absolutely not. If I show vulnerability, I will not make it. And here's what I mean, because I think a lot about that, because vulnerability is a very scary concept for a lot of people to show our vulnerability. When I show my vulnerability, and a lot of people, by the way, walk to me, they're like, don't show so much of yourself. When I show my vulnerability, it is not like, oh my God, I'm so devastated, help me, it is coming out of, I have processed that vulnerability, I have understood it, I have come to even heal it, and then I speak it. So when I show it to you, it is, or to the public, no one can actually do anything to hurt me because I've already processed and then I've finished. I'm done with I'm summarizing the result for you. So it may sound vulnerable, but it's not nearly. And let me give you an example. And I've interviewed a lot of women, as you have, of course, women leaders, and some of the ones that really have made shifts. It is, one of them was a former CEO of Chanel, for example, and she talks about how she stood in front of her senior managers and said, I am afraid, I'm intimidated by you. I'm afraid when I come up with these ideas and all of these things. For their leader to say I'm intimidated by you because because I'm so afraid you judge me and you do this and you do this and you do this. That's constructive vulnerability from strength. She was showing it. She was telling the truth. Basically, she was being very authentic. And as a result, all her senior managers started also showing up authentically. They all said, oh, I'm scared of this. Oh, I'm worried about this. Oh, no. Because these are things that we all have, but we keep to ourselves because we're so scared of the others. Well, what I'm learning is actually the reverse works better. The reverse, which is saying, these are my true feelings, and this is what I'm feeling right now. When I show myself up, it actually is enabling more people to say, oh my God, we are feeling the same way. And then we have much more a constructive dialogue rather than we are all coming with our shields on. And I'm like trying to show you this and you're showing me this. And we're not being able to move forward because we're each coming with our defenses. And that's what I mean by constructive vulnerability, or vulnerability that comes out of strength. We need more authentic leadership at the moment. That's
Zainab, I agree with you, but I must tell you that, as one has always said, there's always been this way of boxing females, and that does exist. We can't deny it. Okay, if somebody is, strong-willed, they're expressive, they're sort of, they say that, if you're a man and you're aggressive, if you're a man and you're assertive, it's assertive if you're a guy, but if it's aggressive, if it's a woman. If you're the very negative connotations for coming across as strong and holding your own. And that is something I think a lot of women struggle with right now. And I think that's going to be more of a struggle, especially given the fact that we're looking at a massive disruption in lifestyle. We are a privileged lot here, but, you're looking at, in India, we've seen, some of the worst sort of treatment that had, we understand there's a huge rise in domestic violence. There's a lot of job loss on the lowest level. So what do you think women who have, organizations that can create more leaders can actually really do to turn around and look at this time, which is particularly difficult for the most marginalized women in our country?
Well, let me start by
not just money. I'm talking about.
Well, let me start by answering your observation, which is absolutely correct. It's we are being attacked right, left, and center. And when women get attacked, we get attacked in a very intimate way. And usually it's on it has to do with our sex or sexuality or whatever. And the stories, it's sort of when you get attacked, you are a bad woman. When a man get attacked, he's just a bad manager. He did something bad and then moves on, right? But also we get attacked a lot on our intimate lives, basically.
Yeah.
And recently, and I'm going to say something also maybe controversial in here. Recently I was telling a woman that I recently met, I was like, how I was for the same act, for the same show that I've done. In one part of the world celebrated me as a warrior, literally, trying to change the world. And the other part of the world, for the exact same act, for the exact same show, called me, excuse my language, quote unquote, a whore. And it really, really, really hurt me and hurt my family, and because it's so private and it's so intimate, and it's and I know, of course, it's not true, but it's still hurtful. And here's what I see it over and over and over again. I see it with all kinds of public figures, female public figures. When the attack is on them, they are always using derogatory words, whether it is Hillary Clinton or whether it is a parliamentarian in Iraq, or whether, always derogatory words about their person, excuse my language, a bitch, a witch, and all of these things. They're all bad words about her own. Here's my message. Coming out of it, because when I get attacked, I retreat it. And a lot of women retreat, basically saying, I can't, too much, all of that. Here's what I'm learning. Embrace it and move forward. That's like, that woman in the dinner party.
Going on?
Forgive me.
She's saying how women are getting attacked. So she's saying don't retaliate.
Mic's off.
Embrace it.
What do you mean embrace it?
She's showing telling.
Oh, you know, by the way,
somebody
we can
attacked
hear
me?
whoever it is who's speaking in the background, and I can hear a man's voice. You better be careful about what you're saying on this show. So please go on, Zainab.
So I'm saying basically, if they call you any of these words, just like, okay, fine, I am these words, move on. Basically, we cannot let these attacks on us because that's the old modes. That's how always we've been attacked on our sexuality or intimacy or intimate lives. And they reveal, I just heard the congresswoman, in America who, they showed nude pictures of her. So she had to resign. A parliamentarian in Iraq, they showed a nude picture of her, so she had to resign. I am basically saying, don't resign. Become, forgive my language, a warrior, combine it. Right? Call it, embrace it, and move on, because they keep on attacking us on the same issue, and it's not true, and it forces us to resign, and then we leave rooms for more manipulation of us. So embrace and move forward, and not let these things hurt us.
Don't let someone else take away your power. Whether that's on an activist front or whether that's even on on a trolling front. I think that's something that's been happening quite a lot. And of course, even on an interpersonal one. I'm going to have to give it back to Janvi in a second, but I want to ask you something. We've sort of talked about the larger sort of pandemic and financial marginalization and everything else. One thing I want to just ask you again, and I push you again for this, before I ask you the one question I'm really dying to ask you, is what can we do right now to help the poorest of the poor women, for example, in a country like India? And you're very familiar. It doesn't matter, whether you've seen Congo or Rwanda. You have a great idea in terms of what's happening over here. How can women's organizations help?
We have to really show up more. And I don't mean only money, right? I mean, of course, we have to show up on money, but there are groups of women in America, for example, white women, philanthropists in America, what they're doing, and I find it very inspiring, what they're going to Black community. I'm using the American experience as to inspire. They're going to Black communities and saying, we, and created both, the marginalized women, in other words, with the privileged women, created a circle. And these circles were not only, yes, I'll support you philanthropically, but of conversations, of understanding the pain and the major issues. And it wasn't coming out of the white woman saying, let me save you, let me this. It was more about how can we support the women of that community to support themselves, right? So it's not like, let me save you. It is, what can I, but first it starts with listening. And I like this because I have noticed, Fatima, often it's easy to give money. That's the easiest act, to give money. But often, and I've seen it in many countries, in Mexico, in many, many, many countries, the Arab world for sure, Turkey, when you ask people of privilege to go out of their way and comfort zone, to meet with women who lack privilege in a neutral circumstances, or maybe is in the unprivileged circumstances. So go out of the comfort zone and go to these circumstances and listen truly. That's when the resistance happens, because it's like, no, I'll just give the check. And I feel what is at stake today is not about money only. Money, of course, is always going to be the issue of how do I eat, how do I earn, all. But what's at stake today is actually, in a divided world, is our institutions, is our solutions. There's a huge stake, more than ever before, in this shifting moment. And so what we need to do, we need to exercise our feminine power of women, and that it is about kindness and all of these things, but go and have with courage to go to these marginalized communities, hear them, maybe not argue, not even save, but see and find a way. How does one empower and support the rising stars from within these communities to support them in emerging as leaders to solve their community issues? Because I believe that's the solution. It's no longer the savior. It is finding these young women or the warrior women there and support their growth so they can serve their family. So that's I don't know if that helps, but that's what I'm really passionate about these days.
I think what you're talking about is getting more involved beyond just a funding part of it. And I think once again, I'd like to go back into, I don't know if it's technology that's going to enable that or more people that are going to be sort of connected together post this pandemic, because there's a lot of fear right now in India in terms of, actually forget people going out and helping. It's, even on a daily basis, there's a lot of fear when it comes to this particular juncture. Before I hand you back to Janvi, and then of course the audience gets a chance because I'm very greedy with your time. I want to know all about your global haircuts. Okay, I know you get your haircut wherever you go, and you're really lucky, and you don't even hesitate to go into a guy's, barber's shop and everything else. I'm sure that some of them, most of them must be mesmerized when you walk in because you can carry off that haircut.
Oh, they say, no, we're not cutting it.
No,
most of them.
But have you ever been sort of kicked out and then you've argued about it and sort of come back and had a big conversation with the barber in a particularly conservative environment?
It's not kicked out as in leaving the place, but I have gone, because every country I go to, I love going to the barber and find on the conversation. I have been told often, absolutely no, we are not cutting your hair. But it's coming more like, how can I cut a woman's hair? How dare I shave a woman's hair? It's more like absolutely no. And I then engage in a beautiful conversations because a lot of people read too much into my hair. I like it. I literally just like it. And it's easy and I don't dye it. And it's
amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. But yes, I have a lot. And some of them, one of them was in Turkey. It's like, no, usually Arabs, or in the Middle East, they're like, no, we cannot do it. And then we actually have beautiful conversation and drink tea and and chat and all of that. And then at the end, like we're shaking the hands and laughing and all of these things. And I love it because it gets a whole new conversation of what does a woman mean? I've been called all kinds of names because of my hair, especially in the Middle East. And I'm like, how could my hair has anything to do with who I am as an identity or as my, sexual identity? Nothing. It has all the projection and the rumors and all. It's like, actually, if I was any of the things that you tell me I am, I would have said it. It's easier to live in truth than to hide. But yes, it gave me a great adventure. Now, what I did with COVID period, unfortunately, I ordered my own shaving machine, and now I do it myself. I became good at doing it myself, and I don't think I'll go to a barber again afterwards.
I must tell you, that's very courageous of you. And there's so many very, courageous acts that you've performed in life, and you're a generally very strong woman. But this is one of the ones that I'm particularly scared of. Okay, I want to be just like you in many ways. But this I know I'll never manage in my life. But thank you so much. I'm going to now, in fact. Zainab, I've been very greedy with your time. In fact, I'm going to actually now bring Janvi back into this conversation. She's been listening to us, of course, and she's a key stakeholder in this whole process. Janvi, I just wanted to just ask you if you have, anything you wanted to ask Zainab before we share her with the audience.
Yes. Well, Zainab, yours is such an inspiring story, and what you're talking about, that you are approaching it and you're you're opening up to vulnerability. We don't have to be as, aggressive as the man. We can still do it. It's a softer part of women, which you understand and which you are projecting. So when you talk about the Zainab Salbi project that you refer to, and that the talk show that you have, and speak to women in different countries and different audiences, because each country comes up with its own way of handling things. I think for a women's organization that Fatima was referring to, we would like a little more positive about the world going forward, is that yes, we work on transformation, and transformative life skills is the way that we can take the country, in women together. 1.3 billion people, 49% of the country's population. We have to make sure that we go walk, hand in hand and side by side with the men. So we work towards, in our organization with our 17 chapters, be happy to know we're trying to adopt villages. It is work on one village per chapter. We try to adopt the industrial training institutes, which we call it. and speak with the women there. So I think our job is also to mentor, like you do in your world, be a mentor, take on mentees, and try to handhold women together. So it's a two-way street, and that's what we're here to learn from. That's why it's so amazing what you do in your Zainab Salbi show, and speak to more and more women, because we'll have to look at the softer and the more positive areas to go forward. We can't deal in anger all the time. That is my feeling, and I'm so glad you are speaking about it as well. I would like now, we have a lot of our past presidents, Zainab. Our organization, I'm the 37th president. We have 36 great women. Two of them are with us today. I would like to call upon them, if they would please come up with their questions, and maybe Pritika can coordinate this. I understand our past presidents are here. May I call upon them to ask their question? Rashmi?
Sure, so we do have Mrs. Chandran here. Kavita Chandran is here.
Okay. Kavita, would you like to, or leave it to our past president if they would like to join us, or any of our members who would like to come up with the first question? I can see
so
that
my counterpart from Bhubaneswar. She's the chapter chair of Bhubaneswar, and she would like to ask a question. She's Dharitri Patnaik.
Hi, Zainab Salbi. It was excellent listening to you. Sorry, I'm choked. Having worked and still working in the women rights arena, I think since I was a child, having had a traumatic childhood, as you know, it's more than 64% of sexual abuse happens within families, and a lot of us go through it. And seeing injustice, anger is obviously the outcome of it. And most of us try to channelize our anger and our fights and struggles and make personal political. And you found a voice. You found a way to tell your story. It took me 31 years to write down what I went through, and I'm already 47, and I've been, since the last 16 years, been asked to write it down, but I don't, with the fear of being judged, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of, just, also the thing is, how would my story affect people who are least bothered about it? I do share my story with people who've gone through similar situations, experiences, because that's how we connect. But most of the time, people say, oh, she's a woman of privilege, because one is economically privileged, one is perceived as one's always had a very smooth lifestyle, and everything's been offered, without, on a golden platter. So how does one come out of it? You've been a role model. I've been observing you since years, and what you've been doing with your organization and the kind of work you've been doing. But how do I find my voice? How do I tell the story? And will it make an impact?
Well, we tell our stories. I think it's important. First of all, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your kindness. I think telling the story is the first path of healing for yourself and for others. And I understand your reservation about it, because I had it. I also grew up in privilege. So what do people have to do with stories of a woman in privilege? But I think it's telling the story is the first step. And what it did to me, for me at least, it did two things. A, I released the story from my own chest. But then I believe every woman, when she tells her story, she becomes like a candle for another woman's cave, basically, to tell her you're not alone. I too have faced this, and we can move out of this darkness of the cave together. So I feel like telling our story is the first point of connection. Now, afterwards, there's many steps afterwards, but that's the first point of connection, basically, for healing. So you should do it, regardless of judgment. And here's the thing. We can't be captured by judgment of society. I mean, I come from a culture that has a huge judgment of everything you do and everything we say. And, you know, maybe it's helped being outside to break out of that, but we can't be imprisoned by these things, because here's the headline news. The 21st century needs to be the feminine century, or else we as humanity may not be able to exist. So our own, and the feminine, of course, I don't believe only by women. I really do believe men can also find the feminine in them. But we women also need to find the feminine in us, and not what we have been told the feminine is. The feminine is strong and is fierce and is resilient and is kind and is compassionate, all of these things. But they are much deeper values than what we have told it is. So it is incumbent upon each one of us to break away from these structural fears and shame and sin and all of these things and society gossip that we've been raised up with, because the only way we can actually help ourselves and frankly help everyone else in the process is if we find our most authentic voice, our most authentic values, and speak them with courage. So it's hard, it is not easy, it's sometimes lonely, but here's what I have to report. The taste of freedom, the freedom to find your voice, your values, who you are, your identity outside of what the structure is saying, is so delicious that it is worth the hard journey. And if we don't do it, frankly, then who would? Our daughters, really, we want to leave this to our daughters to do the hard work. So we have to do it ourselves in order to pave the path for them and the generations follow, and for humanity. Frankly, I'm not even exaggerating, to find another way out of this crisis that we are in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darthi. I know that another chapter chair of Mumbai, Malu Natarajan, wants to ask the next question.
Thanks, Pritika. Zainab, that was a very inspiring journey. Thank you so much. If time permits, is it possible for you to recite or read a few lines from your poem, please?
My poem?
That's so, it's beautiful. I've read that so many times and I want to hear it from you.
Which poem? I have written many poems.
One
Which
is,
poem?
what if I'm not sadness? What if I'm not grief?
Oh,
lovely.
I have to find it.
Okay, what if you have, read one of your poems. We're happy to listen to any of them.
Well, let me see if I have any of my books around. I don't, let's see if I can do it. Hold on, I would have to, I know how to get to my poems.
Only if it's
just
possible.
Give me a
only
second.
if it's possible. Thank you.
I'll have to. Well, I can tell you a poem that I've never shared. I open it and here it is.
Okay.
And it's not edited or anything like that, but I wrote it a few days ago.
Okay.
The gate of heaven, excuse me, the gate of heaven is open to you. All you need is to take a step forward. Fear not the love it shows inside, fear only the fear you have within. Love in that place is boundless. Terms and conditions are clueless. When plenty is the rule and scarcity is the obscene, the gates of heaven is right there in front of you. All you need to do is to take a step forward. Look not at your back and what people have to say about you. Look forward at God's love in His mystery. Trust not your worry and your chatter. Trust your heart's silence in all the matters. The gate of heaven needs your knock at His door to open.
Wow.
Thank you so much. I have goosebumps. Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Zainab, I think we really are a privileged lot to have, having heard straight from the horse's mouth, in fact, a poem which you haven't shared with anyone else. Thank you so much. It means really a lot. And the entire session with us has been really a revelation of thought with, between the two of you, with you and Fatima asking such relevant questions it gave us an insight into another side to your eminent personality. So thank you so much, Zainab, for doing this. And thanks, Fatima. And before we could call it a wrap session, I would now like to invite our Vice President of Flow, Mrs. Jayanti Dalmia, to render the vote of thanks. This is Jayanti Dalmia, Vice President Flow. Please.
Good evening, Zainab. It was fantastic listening to you. Before I give my vote of thanks, I have a small question. I would like to find out, like, how can we educate the younger lot, the students especially, to raise their voices against any kind of, injustice?
So you broke up for a second. Tell me again, what's the question? Sorry.
So how can we educate the female students, younger lot, to raise their voices against any kind of injustice? Because all kinds of abuses do happen. We all know about that. And they are all scared to open up. The younger children, the adults.
Yeah. I mean, people get scared to open up because of their circumstances. That's one a good way of constructive vulnerability. You know, when I, for example, start talking, I mean, do you know how shameful it is in my home of origin in the Middle East when I say my ex-husband raped me? You know, because people is like, no, there's no such thing as rape in marriage and all of these things, but it was rape. I mean, there's no drop of my blood. So when I say that, when I say I was abused, when I said, or I say my grandmother went through that, I'm saying it, it's a long time ago, I have been freed from that sad story. Now I say it constructively. It sounds vulnerable. It's no longer vulnerable for me, but it is to open the door for others to show up. And I cannot tell you how many women I bumped into. This is no airports, there are no travels these days, but in my previous life, in travels, in the airport lounge, in restaurants, who would just walk to me out of the blue, and I'm having a meal and they just pour their whole stories out, you know, and start telling me what happened to them. And, you know, at the beginning I was shocked, you know, and then eventually I got used to it. It's like, oh, because I opened up, they're opening up. So I would say the way you encourage it is not only, of course, you talk about women's rights, it's not only inspiring women who are out there, but the more, however one chooses to show vulnerability through our own private story or through perhaps other women's stories, you know, related or not related to us, but how they broke their silence and how they have done it, that can be an inspiring way to sort of encourage them without just say, speak, speak, speak. Because when you say that, they have to deal at home with all kinds of people. It's hard. But if you tell them the story of a woman, I wrote 2 books trying to ask the question, what is the secret sauce for inspiration in women's lives? I really don't know. Like, you know, is it education? Is it microcredit? Is it economic empowerment? Is it, you know, all of these things? And I tried it. And I came to the conclusion, the secret sauce is in inspiration. That's it. All what we need to do is inspire women, to tell them that there is another way out. You're not alone, and there's another way out. And that inspiration then leads them to knocking on other doors and finding ways to find their, you know, tools, education, microcredit, economic jobs, they are all tools. But the secret sauce that triggers the change is literally in inspiration.
Thank you, Zainab. It was really fantastic. The best protection any woman can have is courage. And I quote Elizabeth Cady Stanton, American social activist and leading figure of the early women's rights movement. This quote resonates strongly with, as I heard you today, Ms. Zainab Salbi. Ms. Salbi, you are a true embodiment of courage, strength, and above all, the voice of an empowered woman who believes in sharing her voice. Your strength and the power to fight back
and be heard and seen. I can't thank you enough for being with us and giving us this eye-opening opportunity to hear your journey. I am sure everyone who's listened to you with rapt attention has got a vivid glimpse of how do people live and cope in the midst of war and violent conflict. Flo salutes you for your tireless work advocating for women and for your incredible honesty, fearlessness, and immense strength. Sincere thanks to Ms. Fatima Karan Mahdi for moderating the session wonderfully. I thank Preetika Balaji, Chairperson Flo Coimbatore, for putting this session together. Sincere gratitude to all past presidents, chapter chairs, and governing body members for being with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
It is my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure listening to you and very, very inspiring.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And special thanks to Fatima, as you said, for her beautiful moderation. I appreciate it, Fatima. Thank you. Thank you very much for all. Thank you. And thank you, Janvi, for all your emails and follow-ups and patience. And I really appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful
Happy
session.
with us, Zainab, and thank you, Fatima.
Thank you.
So, Fatima, this is the message that Zainab that you have given us, that the secret sauce is inspiration. And that is why Flo had started this Eminent Women series to listen to inspiring women like you and take that message back home with us. And we look forward to continue to learn from you and get inspiring stories and do our bit for the world. Because all of us in our organization, we have to go that step beyond, and we will try to do that with our mentorship and menteeship programs that we do. So thank you so much. It was absolutely
Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you, Zainab. It was wonderful talking to you.
Same here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Zainab, Mrs. Umar Rajan would like to say hello to you. It was,
Hi,
after
Umar,
all,
how are
thanks
you?
to her.
Hi, Zainab.
I don't see your picture though.
I know, Zainab, because I'm having some Wi-Fi problems, but thank you so much for coming on this show and giving us your time. And like I always say, Zainab, I'm waiting for you to come to India and start a chapter here, and I'll help you here. So really, really looking forward to that, Zainab.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.